Yeah, how many of you are old enough to remember when that song was popular? Just raise your hand. Just admit it. I know it's sad, isn't it? September of 1988 was when that song came out, and that's where the first happy face emoticon ever came about. Long before we had cell phones, we had pagers, and there were shirts made and bumper stickers and had the big smiley face, "Don't worry, be happy," right? And then they kind of added like hippie-looking letters to it. I mean, we saw it everywhere. It was everywhere, and it sounds like a good philosophy for life, right? We've been talking about life. Hey, just don't worry, be happy. Not too long ago, probably about a year and a half ago, my alternator on my blue van went out while I drive a minivan, by the way, because I'm cool like that, and that's how we roll in the Pollard house. Anyway, we've given up a long time on our youth, and so I called out a roadside mechanic, and he was a Jamaican guy and had that really cool accent. And I said, "Man, yeah, my car, something's wrong with it." He's like, "Oh, don't worry, man, don't worry." And I was like, "No, my car's broke. I am worried, okay?" And so he's starting to look at it, and he's like, talking about all these different things. He's like, I was thinking, how much is this going to cost? And so we get down to that point. He's like, "Your alternator's out, man." And so we go to the store. He gets the part, and we come back, and I said, "Well, how much do you think it's going to run me?" Because I'm thinking in my mind. He's like, "Oh, don't worry, man." And I'm like, "Really? Like, you're just going to do this for free? You are amazing, I'm like, I am worried because we all know the reality of life. Have you ever really listened to the lyrics of that song? So I think we're going to have some emoticons come up on the screen. So the left-hand side is happy. The right-hand side is the anxious one or the worried one. So I'm just going to kind of go through some things, and you tell me. I'm going to first go through the lyrics of that song. And if you think that is something that you'd be happy about, just raise your left hand to match that one. If you think it's something you'd be worried about, I want you to raise your right hand. Everybody got that? Clear? Just kind of, we'll take a test here. So the first one is, "Ain't got no place to lay your head, somebody came and took your bed." So how many of you would be happy? All right, yeah, so most of you anxious about that, right? But the song says, don't worry, what? Be happy. Hey, you ain't got a bed? Don't worry, just be happy about that. So guys, try to convince your wife of that next time, right? All right, next one. Okay. The landlord say, not says, the landlord say your rent is late. He may have to litigate. Y'all gonna be happy about that? Oh, we got a lawsuit? Yeah, don't worry. No. Be happy about that. You're gonna go to prison. No worries. All right? Ain't got no cash, ain't got no style. In other words, you're dead broke and your clothes are horrible. All right? How many of you are gonna be happy about that or worried, anxious? Yeah, this is reality. So it's like when we listen to that song, we're thinking, this is not really what life is about. It's not really a livable philosophy. Ain't got no girl to make you smile. So you're alone. You can, a guy. So if you're married, you probably need to think before you answer this, okay? If she left, woo! Like some of you, without even thinking, it was just that left hand started going up. I need to pray for you and your marriage. But, we've been talking about life, and we talked about the game of life, the board game. So I brought it with me again, and I'm going to just kind of go through some things. The reality is when you're playing the game of life, you're traveling along the path, and you get to certain points of your life, and you have decisions that you have to make, or you go through certain points or adversity or different, kind of time periods of your life. And so I brought a couple of them, and I want you to do the same thing. Left hand worried, or left hand happy or anxious. So let's just start post-high school. You graduate, when most of us say we're happy at that. But how many of you felt happy versus anxious on deciding whether or not you're going to go to college, and if you're going to go, what college you're going to go to, and how you're going to pay for college? How many of you during your college years found yourself anxious about certain things? Just kind of hold your right hand up. Or how many of you just kind of like, college, career, doesn't matter, just be happy? All right, that's fair. That's good. All right, the next one here. So here, in the game of life, you can be different things. You can be an athlete. Anybody dream of being a professional athlete? I did, and that dream got shattered. First day of basketball practice in college, I'm like, I'm not as good as anybody on this team. So, and in the program at HBU, it said, Robbie's a good practice player. In other words, don't expect his feet to ever hit the court. But boy, he'll fill up those Gatorades for those guys. Police officer, we got some police officers in here. And your salary is $100,000, which is fantastic. I think you should petition the mayor on that one. Musicians, right? Stunt performer. My children, I think, want to be that. Lawyers and teachers, right? So you kind of get to that point in your life and you're wondering, what career do I want? What college am I going to go to? So there's anxiety with that. And then you get your job, and then what happens when you lose your job? Are we happy or are we anxious about that, right? Bills start piling up, and so there is some anxiety in life. And then you go to this next stage of life, and so I've got a blue car for my game piece for my blue minivan that's out there. And then you get married. And on the game of life, it forces you to stop, and you have to get married. So I got married, and there's Leslie, so now we're in the car. But how many of you, when you were considering marriage, got a little bit freaked out and anxious about that? Thank you, Sean, for being honest. Vanessa's not in here, so that's why he was able to do that. I was at total peace until the day of my wedding ceremony, and all the groomsmen went out to take the pictures with the bride, and I was left in the choir room at Foundry United Methodist Church. And I'm telling you, man, I was about to have a panic attack in there. Like, I'm about to be married for the rest of my life. I'm going to be with one woman for the rest of my life. I know she's the right person for me. And I'm starting to sweat thinking, my goodness, this is a big step, right? It's a big step to get married and commit yourself to one person for the rest of your life. And so there is some anxiety when you're coming into that phase of your life. And then you get to the part where you buy a house. And man, buying a house can be stressful, or deciding where you're going to live, right? So you decide, am I going to buy a family house, which, yeah, that's a nice house, or maybe a studio apartment? Are we going to be living in an apartment? Are we going to live in a house? Are we going to buy a TP? That's one of your options when you play the game of life. Or, if you want to go all out, you can live in a windmill. So the game of life has really advanced beyond when I was playing it as a kid. But you decide where you're going to live, and there's some stress involved with that, and then come the children. Right? How many kids? How long do we need to wait? Do we need to be more financially stable before we have children? I mean, so there's stress, right? And then you have the children, and isn't having children, it's all happy. There's no anxiety about having children, is there? As you're sitting in the ER because they broke their arm again for jumping off the couch again, and the doctors are like, oh, you're in here again, huh? No, seriously, he did. He really did. Broke his arm, jumping off the couch again. There's anxiety with that. And then as you're raising your children, you're wondering, are we doing the right things? Am I failing as a parent? What is this child going to grow up to be like? And so as much as Bobby McFerrin, when he wrote that song, would like you to say, don't worry, be happy as the philosophy of your life, the reality of life is there's a lot of things to worry about. There are a lot of questions that we ask. There are a lot of things that we really do get anxious about, isn't it? Then comes tax season. Remember the first time you paid your taxes and filed your taxes? My goodness, it's like, is the IRS, are they sitting there right now? Because back in the day, we filed ours on a typewriter. Remember that day? Right? Or you actually hand wrote it and you had the big booklet. Now, of course, with TurboTax and this internet thing is just amazing. It blows your mind at how much easier it's made our lives. But there are a lot of things in our lives that we get anxious about, isn't there? Lots of things. Our kids, our family, paying taxes, our house, just a lot of things in our lives that regardless of what Bobby McFerrin wants you to think in that song, we do worry. We do fret. We do get anxious about those things. And so as we began our series last Sunday in the book of Luke, as Jesus was teaching on life, we're going to continue today. If you have your Bible, find Luke chapter 12. If you don't have a Bible, the verses will be up here on the screen. But a man came to Jesus, and he was at this particular intersection in life, and what he was worried about was the fact that his brother owed him some money from their inheritance. And so this man comes to Jesus and he says, you need to tell my brother to split our inheritance, to give me the portion of the inheritance that's coming to me. And we looked last week at what Jesus taught him, and he said, look, your life is not measured by how much you have, but your life is really ultimately measured by who has you. In other words, stop worrying so much about how much money you have, how nice a car you drive, all the things that you enjoy, and worry more about when your soul is required of you, who has you? Are you a child of God? Because your life is not measured by the things that you accumulate in this life. And he talked about covetousness, and covetousness is a real problem for all of us. We look at what someone else has, we look at their quality of life, we look at the things that they enjoy, and there's something in us that kind of wants that as well. And Jesus said to beware of covetousness, because a man's life doesn't consist of the things that he has. But there's something else that's a part of our lives that Jesus gets to here in Luke chapter 12, and I want us to begin in verse 22. And he, being Jesus, said to his disciples. Now I want to stop there for just a moment. Jesus goes from talking to this man who had a question about his inheritance, and now he speaks specifically to the 12 men who have given their lives to follow Jesus. And so he's talking to these men, whereas the man that he had just talked to, remember the story? He had so much money, he needed to build bigger barns and have more space for all the stuff he'd accumulated. These disciples are very different. They don't have a lot. They're not worried about having more space for all the stuff that they have. Their worry is, are we going to have enough? Because Luke's gospel said that when Jesus called these disciples to follow him, in Luke chapter 5, Luke describes it in this way: they left everything and followed him. They left their livelihood, they left their house, they left their carts, they left their food, they left everything to follow after Jesus. So the first man in Luke chapter 12 is worried about having too much, but these disciples are worried about something completely different, wouldn't you imagine? They're not worried about having a bigger barn, they're worried about whether or not they're going to have a place to lay their head. And so Jesus begins to teach his disciples. Notice as the story continues in verse 22. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. Now notice this, for life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. So in these verses, Jesus lays some groundwork for some tremendous teaching that we should really take to heart about our lives. And he teaches us something about what it's going to take for us to overcome anxiety and worry in our lives. So before we go into Jesus' teaching, I want you to just right where you're sitting to consider something right now. Today, what are you worried about in this life? What are the things that kind of eat you up from on a day-to-day basis or week to week or month to month? What are some of your biggest worries and fears sitting here in this room today? Are they financial? Are they relationship issues? Are they your job? What is it that you're really worried about? Because Jesus says something in these verses. And in verse 22, I want you to see something about your anxiety and your worry. And this teaching of Jesus, I really hope, will shatter our lives and really ultimately help us in our journey along the road of life. Much of our anxiety is rooted in the physical world that we can see and touch and feel. Think about it for a moment. When is the last time that you were really anxious about spiritual things? Much of our anxiety is rooted in the world that we see or the world that we encounter on a daily basis. But in verse 23, Jesus moves from the physical world in verse 22 to a spiritual world in verse 23. He says that life is more than the physical world in which you live. Did you hear what Jesus said? He said, for life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Your life is not measured by how much you have, and your life is not measured by what you have either. Your life is not merely the clothes that you have on or the food that you put in your body. Jesus says you're more than that. There's more to life than the physical world that is all around you. But there is a connection between your level of anxiety and stress and worry and your perception about the world around you and the spiritual world that is beyond. So what do you stress out about the most? Time, money. 90% of marriages, one of their biggest problems is the fights that they have over money. People stress about money all the time. Are we going to have enough? Are we living paycheck to paycheck? We're not able to put money in retirement. When I retire, am I going to have enough? How am I going to be able to take care of my family? I mean, on and on and on. Can we have a third child? Can we really afford a third child? We're looking at adopting a fourth child. I'm thinking, man, if we can't feed the 3 horses that we have right now, how are we going to bring another child into this family and feed them? I mean, anxiety is all around us. And much of our anxiety is rooted in the physical world. But here's the thing about worry and anxiety. It's so deceptive. It's so deceptive, and many of us struggle with it, but we don't really realize that worry actually gives us a false view of what life is all about. Because we're so worried about the physical world around us, we begin to think that the life that we're living right here on this earth and the physical world around us is all that there is to life. But Jesus said there is more to life than the food that you're eating and the clothes that you're wearing. Worry reduces our lives down to the physical realm. But in verse 23, Jesus moves us beyond the physical world, and He says that your life is not what you eat or what you put on. Life is more than that. There is a bigger, more important world that you're living in than this physical world that is around you. Because let's face it, with all that goes on in the physical world, there is a lot to be anxious about. Watch the news in the evening. What are most of the headline stories? There are things that when you hear them, it freaks you out a little bit. ISIS, have they come into the United States or not? Are there terror cells in the United States? Ebola, right? The whole virus that's killing people in Africa, is it going to come here? Murder, crime, rape, all these different things. And we think, man, am I going to be able to keep my family safe? Am I going to be able to provide for my family? What's the economy going to look like in the years to come? But Jesus gives us a couple of keys to overcoming the worries and anxieties that we face in life. And listen as He expounds upon this. Look at verse 24. I want us to stop at the first word, consider. That word consider, it's a Greek word that means to observe fully, to discover. Behold, what Jesus said in the first two verses, 22 and 23, is don't be anxious about your life. Don't be anxious. Don't be worried. But He doesn't say the key to be overcoming anxiety is to just be happy. He says what you need is to have a rediscovery of something that is beyond. You need to consider something completely different. When our lives are filled with worry, we need a change of perspective. Let's finish reading verse 24. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? The first thing Jesus says we need to consider, and this is so important for you, is to consider your worth in the eyes of God. When you find your life overcome with anxiety and worry, the first thing that you need to do is to consider your worth in the eyes of God. Notice how verse 24 ends. Of how much more value are you to God the Father than the birds? Those birds that they don't have to plant, they don't have to sow, they don't have to reap. They simply enjoy the harvest. They don't have barns like the previous guy that was so wealthy. They don't have anything, and yet God takes care of them. And then Jesus said, if God is going to take care of birds like that, of how much more value are you to God? Many times we are worried because we have lost our perspective of our worth in the eyes of God. And we begin to measure our worth not based on what God has said and demonstrated in His Word. We begin to see our value in the eyes of God based upon our circumstances. So when things in our lives go bad and we get worried and anxious, we think, well, God must not like me. God must have something against us. And Jesus tells His disciples, don't be anxious about your life. Consider the ravens, how God takes care of them, and how much more valuable are you than the birds of the air. Jesus said in verse 7 of Luke chapter 12 that even the hairs of your head are all numbered. David in Psalm 8 wrote this, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? In Philippians, Paul writes, but God, being rich in mercy because of the great love with which He loves us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up with Him and seated us with Him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, so that in the coming ages He might show the immeasurable riches of His grace in kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. You will never find that kind of promise made to birds or to animals or to any other created thing. God seats us in the heavenly places that for all eternity He will show us the immeasurable riches of His grace and kindness toward us in Jesus. You are valuable in the eyes of God. If God feeds the birds of the air, do you think that God is going to take care of you, who is so much more valuable than birds? Here's what I want you to see. When the disciples left everything to follow Jesus, there's no doubt that there was anxiety in that decision. But Jesus reminds them, don't worry, God values you. If God takes care of the birds, He's going to take care of you. When you find yourself overcome with anxiety and with fear and with worry, I want you to realize that it's actually a lack of faith. And Jesus calls us to consider our value in the eyes of God. We begin to take our eyes off of our value in the eyes of God and how God sees us, and we begin to focus on other things. Notice in verse 27, consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, notice this, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will He clothe you, O ye of little what? Faith. The root of anxiety and worry in this life is a lack of faith. It's a lack of faith in your worth in the eyes of God. On our wedding day, when Leslie and I got married 14 years ago, this week, by the way, she's put up with me that long, Leslie wanted calla lilies, which are beautiful. They're a beautiful flower and awfully expensive when it comes anniversary time. Just throw that in there, just throw that in there. But we get these arrangements on the wedding day, beautiful flower arrangements, and then in no time at all, what happened to those flowers? They died. Just yesterday, I was mowing my grass, and for one of the first times in forever, I was actually able to grow a few flowers in my bed this year. The rest of them died, but there were 2 of them that somehow lived. And yesterday, I had to pull them up because they finally bit the dust and they died. That's the thing with flowers. Leslie and I, on our trip, vacation this summer, we drove up through Kentucky and we visited the Creation Museum. We walked around this beautiful garden. All of these wonderful flowers. I mean, just the beauty of God's creation. But you know what's going to happen to all those flowers? Eventually they're going to die, they're going to be pulled up, and they're going to be discarded. And Jesus said, consider the lilies of the field, that if God clothes them with such a glory that even Solomon and all his riches and wealth couldn't be compared to, how much more is God going to clothe you? O you of little faith. You have to realize that the source of our anxiety is that we have lost sight of our value in the eyes of God. We lose confidence in the goodness of God. This happened yesterday to me at Splashtown. We bought boys season passes this year, so we went. It's the final weekend. They had a special day, and all their Dippin' Dots were half price. So normally for a small cup, it's about $34. And yesterday we were able to get the incredible deal of $17. It was amazing. No, they had them on sale for like $2.50, and so Leslie went and got a funnel cake because it was, I think, half price. And so we were just eating very healthy yesterday at Splashtown. But, we were riding slides, so we knew we were kind of burning it off, and just sitting in our tubes. And so anyway, we were going to ride something, and so Leslie went and bought Noah Dipping Dots. But Luke didn't get any yet. And so I told Luke, okay, let's go ride our ride, and then we'll come back and get Dippin' Dots. But I could tell in Luke's eyes, he's thinking, I don't believe you. He's like, well, why don't we get Dippin' Dots now? And I'm like, no, we have to go. We got family coming over, so we're going to ride a ride. It's got to be now. We'll ride the ride, and then we'll grab some Dippin' Dots afterwards. So he's like, okay. And he says it with like this shaky confidence. And so we go ride the ride. The moment we wiped out on the tube and came up out of the water, Luke's first response to me was not, man, that ride was great. It was, hey, are we going to still get Dippin' Dots? And I'm thinking, as I'm listening to him, like, what would make you think that I would tell you I'm going to give you Dippin' Dots, but then at the last second I'm going to pull the rug out from under you and not get it? And do you realize that when we come to God with worry and we're worried about our lives, what we're saying to God is, God, we know that you have told us that you'll clothe us and take care of us, but God, there's this anxiety that I have that at any moment you're going to pull the rug out from under me. But Jesus said that is a lack of faith. And so we need a change of perspective when we're walking through life and our life is filled with so much anxiety and worry. We have to consider our worth in the eyes of God. God loves you. God cares for you. You can't do anything to make God love you more, and you cannot do anything to make God love you less. So when you find yourself overcome with worry, you have to consider your worth in the eyes of God. But Jesus says we should also consider something else, and that is the worthlessness of worry. Notice in verse 25, it seems so simple, but I want you to think about it. And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? If then you are not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? As I was preparing this message, I just went online and I Googled the word worry. You should do it sometime. So all these different websites came up. And so then I went and Googled quotes about worry. And I read probably about 50 different people, and the Dalai Lama, all the way to politicians and celebrities. They had all these quotes that I found pretty interesting. But you know what I found out about all of the quotes that I read? No one had anything good to say about worry. So when you know someone who is a worrier, what blemish on your body do you describe them as? A worry wart. Is that positive? Like, it's not a worry beautiful face, it's a worry wart. There is nothing positive about anxiety and worry. When's the last time that you were so anxious about something that you physically and spiritually and emotionally felt better after you worried about it? It doesn't happen. And yet we spend so much time worrying, and Jesus said, how many of you, by being anxious about something, can add just a small time to the end of your life? Man, if I worry and worry and worry about this, I'm going to add more time to my life. In fact, the statistics show that the more worried we are, the less healthy we are. And Jesus says, you can't do a small thing like adding time to the end of your life. Why are you so worried about the rest? Why are you so worried about your life and clothing and food and all of these different things? Don't you know your worth in the eyes of God? And don't you realize how pointless it ultimately is to worry? Because by worrying, we can't ultimately do anything to change the circumstances of our lives. I want you to look at verse 25 again, and I'm going to read through these verses again. And I want you to listen for the positive benefit of worry, not from the mouths of the Dalai Lama or from some politician. I want you to listen to the most important person. It's the mouth of Jesus. Something that he says that is positive, or the benefit of worry. Notice again. And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? If then you are not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Did you catch the benefit of worry in there? Did you hear it? You know why you didn't hear it? Because it's not there. Jesus said there is nothing beneficial in your life by worrying. You don't benefit in any way. What good will worry do versus the good that God has already done and promises to do in your life? So Solomon shared his testimony earlier about giving. When I was in college, I got a job at a shoe store. I worked at a running shoe store at Fleet Feet down in Rice Village, and got my first job, and I was really excited about it. But I was a youth pastor at the time, and at that time, I was not honoring God with my giving. And you know why I wasn't honoring God with my giving? Because I was at a stage of life, I was going through college, and my parents helped me with my college, but I made the decision I was going to buy a truck. And I bought me a 97 Ford Ranger, single cab, massive. I mean, it could have pulled my son's red wagon. I mean, it was that powerful. And so I bought this thing, and I just thought I was on top of the world because I'd had an 88 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme before that, and then I think a 92 Geo Metro. So I was a little bit card deficient now, but now, like I said earlier, I now have the minivan, and so I finally arrived in life. Anyway, it is 3 years newer than my 97 Ford Ranger. But anyway, I bought it. And so I bought this car. I had a $216 payment every month on my Ford Ranger. And when you're working at a shoe store, I wasn't making a lot of money, and I was going through college at the time trying to pay bills and things like that. And so the first thing I took out of my life, it was my giving. I just told God, I can't afford that right now, and so I'm going to take it away. And you know what the root of that was? I was anxious. I was worried. If I honor God with my money, the math doesn't add up. I'm not going to have enough money left over to pay for my books, to pay for my insurance, to pay for my car. So I'll take care of all those things first, and then if I have a little bit left over, I'll kind of tip God at the end. The root of that worry is a lack of faith. It's fear, ultimately. And so when we find ourselves anxious in our lives, it's really rooted in a lack of confidence in what God can do in our lives. I simply robbed God of my giving because I thought God wasn't able to take care of my needs. Do you see why we have to consider our worth in the eyes of God when we face anxiety in our lives? But Jesus says there's a second key, and I'll wrap it up with this. It's to seek something else. Notice verse 29. And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek His kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Worry is often an issue of perspective and priority in our lives. We have to first change our perspective. We have to remember, we have to consider our worth in the eyes of God and consider the worthlessness of worrying. Why are you worrying about stuff that you can't change? Consider your worth in the eyes of God. Change your perspective. Because see, in verse 30, unbelievers worry because they don't have a perspective about God. And when you're worried about everything in the physical world, what Jesus is saying, you're doing what every other person who's not a child of God does. Every other child at Splashtown yesterday can question whether or not I would buy them Dippin' Dots because they're not my kid. But my son Luke needs to understand that if I tell him I'm going to buy Dippin' Dots for him, I am going to do what I said I would do. He needs to understand he's my kid. He's my son. I'm his father. And my responsibility is to look after him and take care of him and clothe him. And I think we see the analogy between God the Father in our lives. And when we worry about the things of this life, we're worrying as though God is not our Father. Like, I don't know if God's going to provide. I don't know if God's going to help me through this part of life. I don't know if God even knows that I've lost my job. I don't know if God knows the stress that I'm under. I don't know if God is hearing my prayers about my loved one who is sick. And God is saying, no, don't seek after the things of the world. That's what unbelievers do. But notice His teaching as it continues. Instead, verse 31, seek His kingdom, and these things will be added unto you. On the screen, I think it'll be up here. Look at verse 29. Do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink. Do you see the self-centeredness that is rooted in our worry? I'm worried about me and what I'm going to do and how am I going to be provided for. But notice in verse 31, instead, don't seek you, don't seek yours, but seek His kingdom. And what happens? And all of these things will be added unto you. All of these things. What is the source of worry? It's that our priority gets out of whack. Our perspective is out of whack and our priorities are. We're so focused on us and me, and not always selfishly. I don't want you to misunderstand. We're not like we're worried about ourselves because we're inherently selfish all the time. Sometimes things in our lives happen and we get worried and we can't see beyond the difficulty that's in front of us. And Jesus said, change your perspective, your worth in the eyes of God. Remember that worth. And then He says, stop seeking everything that's here and now, but begin to seek God's kingdom, and all of these things will be added unto you. A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with a lady that's a dear friend of mine. And she came to me for just some counseling, and she really dealt with anxiety. It was something that she worried about all the time. Dealt with it on every level of her life, with her children, with finances, with her marriage. And she was just a nervous wreck all the time. And she came to me and she said, I'm just really tired of living this way. I'm so stressed out all the time. It takes away my joy of life. I'm not enjoying my marriage. I'm not enjoying my kids. What can I do about it? And this is what I told her. When Jesus said to seek the kingdom of God, what is the kingdom of heaven? What is the kingdom of God? The kingdom of heaven is God bringing healing to the brokenness of this world. And this is what I told her. One of the best things I have found in my own life to overcome anxiety and worry is to stop focusing on myself and my circumstances, but begin to see the needs of other people and do what I can to share the love of Jesus Christ with them. So I gave her a challenge. I said, for 1 week, every prayer that you pray, it cannot be about what you're going through in your life. You can only pray for other people. And then you have to do one thing every day for 7 days. and you have to do something to meet someone else's need. Go buy them coffee, take them to dinner. If you know someone in need, go buy them $25 worth of groceries. Do something for someone else and make it your life's mission every day to bring healing to somebody's life. And so for an entire week, what I was encouraging her to do was to seek the kingdom of God, bring the healing of Jesus into people's lives. And when that happened, she called me up and she's like, it's amazing what's happened. I haven't been worried this week. What I've been really more focused on is how can I do something to help someone else? You see, it's a change of perspective and priority. When we find ourselves anxious about the things in our lives, it's because we've forgotten that we're a child of God. We belong to Him and that He will take care of our needs. But we've also gotten our eyes off serving the Lord, and we've gotten our eyes on ourselves. So the key to overcoming anxiety is to consider and to seek. Seek His kingdom, and everything else will be added unto you. Food? Yes. Clothing? Yes. Peace? Yes. Safety? Yes. Seek God, trust Him, and Jesus said all these things will be added to you. Regardless of what Bobby McFerrin tries to tell us, the antidote for worry is not just you being happy. Because ultimately, true happiness and joy and peace comes in a relationship with God where we know Him and we are living out His purpose in our lives. I want to close just with verse 32. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Yesterday, when I was standing in the line at Dippin' Dots and overpaying for little pebbles of ice or whatever it is, it brings me pleasure when I look down at my son and there's a smile on his face because of something that I've done for him. Did you hear what Jesus said? Don't fear. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. What is that kingdom? Healing being brought to brokenness in this world. What is that kingdom? It's a kingdom of peace. It's a kingdom of life. It's a kingdom of joy. Consider, change your perspective, remember your worth in the eyes of God, and begin to seek His kingdom. And that will help you with the anxiety and the worry that you face in your life. Will you pray with me? Father, we thank You so much for the peace that comes from knowing Jesus. Just the fact that we're Your children, God, that You love us and care for us should bring us great joy. But oftentimes our eyes get focused on the wrong things. And so today, if there are people in this room who are struggling with worry and anxiety, I pray that today they would remember, they would consider their worth in Your eyes. That You love them to the point that You sent Jesus to die on the cross for their sins so that they might have life in the name of Jesus. And that we would walk out of this room today not seeking our own will or our own pleasure, but we would do as Jesus said, and that is to seek the kingdom. And Your promise is that all these things will be added to us. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.